All right, let's get right to it. To really get a handle on the Eucharist from this perspective, you have to start with its sheer scale. The author kicks things off with this powerful quote, framing the Eucharist not as just some ritual, but as one of the most exalted, most profound mysteries of the faith. That single idea right there really sets the stage for everything else we're about to cover.
Now this is where the author's argument gets really fascinating. You see, he doesn't see the Eucharist as a standalone thing. He presents it as part of a wonderful triad, putting it right up there with the Trinity and the Incarnation. Just think about that for a second. From his viewpoint, the Eucharist is on the very same level of divine, mind-bending mystery as the nature of God himself and the fact that God became man. Wow.
Okay, so if these three mysteries form a kind of triad, how exactly do they connect? Well, the source describes them as an organic, divine chain, a series of divine communications that literally link heaven to earth.
Let's just walk through the logic the author presents here because it's really a divine progression. Step 1, you've got the Trinity. The Father communicates his divine nature to the Son. Then step 2, the Incarnation. The Son takes that divine nature and communicates it to his own human nature. And that leads directly to the final step, the Eucharist, where the God-man delivers himself, that complete, perfect union of divine and human, to the Church. You see how one step just flows right into the next?
Now, that second step in the chain, the Incarnation, really hinges on this core theological idea, the hypostatic union. It's a big term, but it just means the perfect, inseparable union of the divine and human natures in the one person of Jesus Christ. In this whole framework, it's kind of like the theological bridge that makes that final step, the Eucharist, even possible.
And this really brings us to the author's main point. He uses this incredible metaphor of a precious chain. In his view, the Trinity, the Incarnation, and the Eucharist, they're not three separate doctrines you memorize. No, they are the living, active links that literally weld God to humanity, uniting heaven and earth in a real way.
Of course, this line of thinking brings up a huge question, right? If this mystery is something that's way beyond our normal human understanding, how can anyone possibly be sure that it's true? Let's see how the author tackles that exact challenge.
And you know, the source doesn't back down from this at all. It asks the question point blank. How can our little finite minds possibly wrap themselves around something so infinite? I mean, our own logic and reasoning can only take us so far, and this doctrine claims to go way, way beyond those limits.
So the author's answer doesn't come from philosophy, it comes from authority. He argues that, according to Catholic teaching, the truth of the Eucharist isn't something we arrive at through our own smarts. Instead, it's a revealed truth, a gift from God, that is then protected and guaranteed by the teaching authority of the Church, which he calls the pillar and ground of truth.
So this is kind of how that flow of authority works. First, God gives the revelation. Then, the Church acts as the guardian of that revelation, becoming what the source calls the proximate norm of faith for all believers. And when it comes to the Eucharist specifically, the definitive teaching was laid out with unbelievable clarity at the Council of Trent. For Catholics, this is the rock they stand on.
Okay, so the Church guarantees the truth. But what exactly is that core doctrine that was so clearly defined? Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
The central mechanism, the theological engine that explains how this mystery happens, is called transubstantiation. All it means is that while everything that you can see, touch, and taste, the appearances of bread and wine stay the same, their fundamental reality, their very substance, is completely changed into the substance of the body and blood of Christ. So the Council of Trent defined this with 4 key pillars that all hold each other up. First, it says Christ's presence isn't just a symbol, it's real and substantial. Second, its main purpose is for the spiritual nourishment of our souls. Third, the way this happens is through transubstantiation. And finally, the act itself is considered a representation of the unbloody sacrifice of Christ on the cross.
And that brings us to the ultimate why. We've talked about the what and the how, but why does this great mystery even exist? What's its purpose for you and me today?
This is where the author brings all of that high-flying theology right down to a super-personal level. The ultimate purpose, he explains, is incredibly intimate. The Eucharist is presented as God's gift of himself, given to us as daily spiritual food. It's that final link in the divine chain we talked about, and it's meant to deliver the very life of God directly to the soul of the believer.